Hello, and welcome to EPR with your favorite environmental nerds, Nick and Laura. On today's episode, Nick and I discuss reframing your mindset. We talked to David Corsar about National Wildlife Federation, the Peace Corps, and EcoLeaders. And finally, there's one strand of silk for each kernel of corn on a cob. How about that?
Isn't that wild?
Only one?
Yeah, in one part.
Gosh, it seems like something? Okay.
But there's lots of kernels of corn on a cob. It just doesn't seem like it. It's just all the silk kind of goes to the top.
Right, yeah. Huh, interesting.
Right? I thought so.
Hit that music.
Come join us for NAEP's 2022 Annual Conference and Training Symposium on May 16th through May 19th in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Registration is open now, so you should check it out. It's going to be a lot of fun. We at EPR are going to be doing our first live show there, which is going to be so cool, and we're really looking forward to it. It's going to be an awesome time. So please do check it out at www.naep.org. We appreciate all of our sponsors, and they're what keep the show going. If you'd like to sponsor the show, please head on over to www.environmentalprofessionalsradio.com and check out our sponsor form for details. Let's get to our segment. So you're dealing with mindset. Like, what are you seeing from, like, is it stuff like that where it's like they're not really thinking in terms of career, they're thinking in terms of like individual things? Or is it more like confidence where it's just, I don't know how to be myself at work kind of thing?
Yeah, it's all things. So, these are people who sign up for a career coaching session and then they get to choose out of a list of topics that, what do you want to talk about? And predominantly they pick mindset. And then when I ask them, why did you pick mindset? Sometimes they know, sometimes they don't. So they're just like, well, I don't know. There's just something wrong. So that one just seemed like the best fit. So I'm like, okay, well, let's explore that some more.
Right.
And honestly, when I started career coaching, I didn't think I was going to spend so much time life coaching and helping people with confidence and stuff. Yeah. It's really become like the predominant thing. There's no one I don't talk to that about in some capacity, because ultimately every conversation comes back to networking. What are you doing in your job search? And then they're like,
I know.
I can't, I don't want to. I'm like, what have you been doing for networking? Nothing.
Right.
I'm too scared, like everyone. So it's a lot of like, I don't know what to say. I don't know who to say it to. I don't know if I'm saying the right thing at the right time. And, is what I'm saying making sense? There's just so much just self-doubt. And I think, like you said, remote work, it's hard to deal with people in person. But when you're dealing with people remotely, I mean, imagine how many times you get an email and you're like, geez, was that person trying to be a jerk? Like, when you're working remotely, how many interactions you have that you don't get to see body language and build a reputation or a relationship with someone. So it becomes even more like, is it me? Is it them? Is it like,
yeah. And I think the rule of thumb is always like, if you meet one jerk during the course of a day, that person's a jerk. If everyone you meet's a jerk, you're the jerk. And so it's like, there's ways to tell. And I don't know. I think like, it's interesting you say that. Confidence is, I guess, like over time is something that you can get better at. And I think it's just really hard to take those first few steps sometimes where you kind of get in your own head, like, no one will think I'm great at this, or no one will want me to do this thing or whatever it is. But like, we've talked about before, if that's kind of a defeatist mindset, if that's the way you feel and that's the way that you're projecting yourself, then you're right. And that is what's going to happen. You are going to be stuck where you are and you're going to be doing the same thing that you don't like. And if you don't even try, then you've already failed. So, when I was younger, I had to kind of reorganize myself too. I thought, why try? Why take risks if you know you're going to fail? And then again, I realized, I am failing. I'm failing right now because I'm not taking risks. And sometimes they're scary as heck. I mean, like switching jobs, was really scary because I came to a place where, where there's a small group and we had to rebuild everything from the ground up. And, that's terrifying in a way, but it's worked out pretty great. So I'm really thankful that I did that. And doesn't mean I didn't love working where I was, but it's just, I needed a challenge and this has been it. And it's been awesome.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I think that's a lot to it. People need to have some successes, but they also need to recognize their part in those successes. Mm-hmm. So sometimes someone who is stuck in the habit of, and I have this theory that your mindset is directly related to the stories you tell yourself. And then those stories you tell yourself are born from the stories you've been told as you've been growing up. Yes. So when we talk about person of color from a poor neighborhood, you're told your whole young life that it's going to be hard or impossible for you to do stuff. And if you start telling yourself that same story, that's what you start living. I face a lot of women challenges. I have to figure out if I'm telling myself a story or if the situation is real. There are people who are telling themselves they deserve more money because someone else told them they deserve more money. And now they're out there just repeating that story and they don't even know what they're saying or why they're saying it. And so, I've also talked to people who are they're so negative. I'm like, you're not going to get a job because you talking to me, you sound like a miserable human being. And you've got to break that cycle. You keep telling yourself this narrative that the world's going to end and people suck. And that's one of the mindsets in the environmental field that are very challenging because you can very much get depressed when you start seeing stuff. One of my colleagues used to say, knowledge makes you sad. I think when you start working in the environmental field, you start to see things that regular people, the muggles don't see. And you're like, oh my gosh, the challenges of climate change and the extensive reach. And then going out, just me going out with my friends and seeing like their behavior or lack of attention to sustainability and what they could be doing personally is like very challenging. So there's all kinds of things that can mess with our mindset. But I think as far as confidence, I've read tons of books on how to build confidence. And really, it's just about believing in yourself and getting some wins. And at the end of the day, you just have to stop telling yourself the stories that other people have told you. A lot of the examples in those books are about students who've been told before a test that they're not going to do well or that they belong to a certain group and those groups don't do well and then they don't do well. So it's self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Which again goes right back to the story. If you don't buy into that story, you might be the only person who passes that test.
Yeah, and it's funny. Like so my brother is by no means a dumb person. He's A/B student, in high school, but he was always in my shadow, like always, because I was older, right? I came through first, and I was really good at school, and it's just. Which does not necessarily mean I'm smart, by the way. It just means I'm good at school, right? That's what it means. There's lots of different ways to measure intelligence, lots of different ways to do that, right? They would come after him. They'd be like, oh, you're Nick's brother. You must be like super smart. So yeah, you're going to do great at this. And then he would do okay or good, but not great. And then they'd be like, oh, well, so you're not really smart. It was kind of like defeating for him. So he's like, why do I care about school? Because I'm just not as good as Nick is. And it's like, that doesn't matter, man. It's his mindset got set by other people. Exactly. And that's really what I mean.
He bought the story. And, when you're young and impressionable.
That's what you do. Yeah. He's that and I'm this, we both had that. We actually just, different. Like he was much better in other areas. And so it's just kind of like, oh, wait, no, we both can be great at things. It's all right. Even the same things.
Or different things.
Yeah. We're just great in different ways.
Different, same, whatever.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, yeah. But that takes time to kind of unpack because it sits with you for a long time. And it's weird to, you have to kind of reflect a little bit on how you grew up and what your influences were, what actually caused you to think that have the mindset that you have today, right? And it doesn't mean you cannot change your mindset, which is, people say that all the time. And then, some people will hear that and say, okay, well, whatever, you guys are being ridiculous. But it's absolutely true. You definitely can.
Yeah, it is possible. It's a habit. Your mindset is based on the thoughts that are in your head. So you have to start to first recognize them.
Right.
And then recognize where they're coming from and then figure out what type of thoughts you want to replace them with. And that will change your actions, which is really the goal that you want to have. And I think really one of the best ways to do that is to journal. I think that's a recommendation I make to a lot of my coachees. It's like, get it out a book and write this stuff out and try to figure out where it's coming from.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and honestly, like just having an idea of, for example, like just not wanting to answer a question in a group setting or something like that. Something simple like that. We all have those moments, right? In understanding, oh, I don't want to do that because I'm afraid of being wrong. Why am I afraid of being wrong? Because I think of myself as a smart person and I'm worried that people will think I'm dumb if I do that. There's the issue, right? I'm worried about what other people think. Okay, just do your thing. If you're wrong, you're wrong. And don't be afraid to do that. Especially as a leader, you have to kind of take, you have to bring everybody with you. You're the one in front. You have to be able to take challenges and adapt to them. And that's really hard to do if you're still kind of stuck in your, I don't want to say prehistoric, but you're like, your younger self-doubt mode. It just doesn't work. You can't be a leader with extreme doubt. You can't. So you have to reset.
Yeah. On the flip side, if you find yourself in a workspace where you do try to speak up or contribute and it's completely not appreciated, I've seen that, experienced that, then you have to consider whether, you're in the right place or not.
Exactly. But that's all feedback. It's all information. And I tell people that too. It's like, if you want the things that, these are the things you want. And if you ask for them and you don't get them, and you ask for them well, and you don't get them, then that tells you that you're in the wrong place. And that's exactly it.
Now, tell me how that works with the people who are asking for more money.
Well, you have to ask well. That's the super important part, because I think we've talked briefly about, like, I had, there was somebody years ago who told me that she was going to ask for a huge raise. And I was like, well, okay, cool. Why? And she's like, well, I've been here for 3 years. I'm like, okay, so is everybody else. Why do you want a raise? Yep. And she's like, well, I've been here for 3 years. And I'm like, so?
Yeah.
like, are you good at your job? Are you great at your job? Are you doing things above and beyond what your job title says? Are you taking on more challenges? Are you doing those things? Yes, no? If you're not, and if you don't have an answer for that, if you don't know why, or your answer is just because, that's not good enough. And like, if you're doing that and you don't get a raise, that's different than if you're saying, hey, look, I have been leading this project. It's gone extremely well. We're under budget. I have a great relationship with the client. They really appreciate the work that I do. We're actually going to get more work because of the work that I've been doing. And, I think that's commensurate with a promotion and, a substantial raise, because I am bringing value to the company, and here's how, here's why, and this is what I believe. And if that's the case, if it's actually genuinely true, because if it's BS, your bosses will know. Like, they know who you are, especially the longer you work together. But if it's genuinely true and they still don't give you that, then it's time to go.
Yeah. I think too that, you're talking a lot more in the private space. If you work for government, it's a lot harder. Yeah. You may be providing insane amounts of value, but they don't have that kind of leniency with their budgets. So you also have to consider, but that is something to consider. If you aren't getting paid what you want, you might need to change your situation. So, it could be a new job. It could be looking for a new place to work with a better job title. But there are places that, nonprofits, governments, even some small businesses that just don't have flexibility in their budget. Yeah. But that's on you. That's not, you can't get mad at your employer.
No.
You can get mad at your employer, especially if it's government and you do deserve it. But your only option is to accept it or leave. If you just sit and grumble about it and get worse at your job, then you're creating a bad reputation for yourself. You're probably hurting your work value. Yeah. And that's not going to help you make more money.
No, it really won't. Yeah, like I said, it's a great conversation. It's something I know we're going to come back to a bunch, but why don't we get to our interview now?
Yep.
Cool. Hello and welcome back to EPR. Today we have David Corsar, who's a manager of career development programs at the National Wildlife Federation, on the show. Welcome, David.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's really great to meet you, because Laura has talked about so many wonderful things that you do, and she really is really excited to have you here. And you've also been organizing and presenting at EcoLeaders Conference over the last few years. But we want to start with you telling us a little bit about the National Wildlife Federation as a whole and the work that you're doing for them now.
Sure. Thanks for having me. So the National Wildlife Federation is made up of affiliate organizations in all of the different states in the US and territories. And each of these organizations has their own goals and priorities, but they get together every year and decide on an agenda for the Federation as a whole. And so I work out of our headquarters, which is located in Reston, Virginia, and I manage the career development programs for the Federation. So I'm part of the education and engagement team. And I was brought on our higher education team to work with college students, but it's kind of grown beyond that to include young professionals on one end and also high school students on the other end. So what I do is put together career planning resources for young people who know that they're passionate about the environment, but maybe aren't sure what they want to do for a career. So we have a suite of tools and resources to help young people make those decisions and put together those plans.
Wow. Laura, we should have had him on earlier. What are you doing to me? That's
He's
really
a busy
great.
guy. He's got a lot of
I hear you.
fun stuff to do as well. And it's a great program with lots of great resources.
Yeah. And like, you sparked my curiosity there. You say it started off in one area and then it expanded out to early professionals and in high school. So why the shift? I mean, I think we know, but I'd love to hear how that came to be.
Yeah, I think that there were a few different factors involved. One of them was we started working with college students, especially fellows and interns, and we followed them as they progressed through their careers. And they would give us feedback about things that would be helpful. And we would then feed that back into the young people that were just coming into the program. And then also the National Wildlife Federation has been in K through 12 space for decades. And that has taken shape in a few different ways. The biggest program that we have is called Eco Schools, and that's in hundreds of K through 12 schools and districts across the country. And that's a school greening program. And then we also have a really cool program called Earth Tomorrow that is more location based. And that gets high school students together to learn about environmental justice and careers. So we saw just a lot of natural connections between the work that we were doing in K through 12, and particularly in high schools, and the tools and resources that we were developing originally with college students in mind, but really anyone who is looking to either plan their career from the start or plan changes in their career.
Yeah. Wow. That's really incredible. And, we like to ask a lot of people on the show, about their career paths, and you've had a really impressive and exciting one. Were you always interested in an environmental career?
Yeah, I would say I was always interested in an environmental career, but the way that has taken shape has changed over the years. So, and that I think is helpful for addressing some of the concerns of young people that feel like they have to have it all figured out, before they graduate college or before even they graduate high school. And it's just so not true.
I know.
So that's a thread that we bring up a lot. And actually, I'm glad that you're asking me about my career path, because this is something that I do to everyone else in my conference and webinars. So my first environmental career was as an environmental engineer. And so that's what my bachelor's degree was in, and my first master's degree. My first professional job was as an environmental engineer. And that was mostly on water and wastewater engineering. So working with municipal government.
Yeah. And I can't believe this hasn't come up on the show yet, but you had that experience earlier in your career, and where you took a job that ended up being a poor fit for you. And
yes.
So what's the story there, and how did you navigate out of it?
Yeah. So I was working for a really great organization, a great company. I had a great team. I really enjoyed the people that I was working with, but I found the tasks to be kind of not exciting for me. It was, kind of a classic case of burnout that I didn't have the terminology at the time to recognize. I was just like, what's wrong with me? I have this great career. I like the people that I work with, but I'm not satisfied. And what I found out, or what I realized, was that I was getting a lot of excitement and feedback, positive feedback, from the volunteerism that I was doing with an organization called Water for People. It is an international development organization that works with about a dozen countries, or at the time, about a dozen countries on the ground. Really great sustainable model where all of the materials and work is done with in-country nationals, as opposed to flying in Americans who then disappear and, right, can't address issues as they come up. So I really enjoyed what I was doing there. And I said, well, if I'm getting so much enjoyment out of this volunteerism, maybe I can start looking into careers that are more aligned with the type of mission and work that I was doing there.
Yeah. And I mean, honestly, that makes a ton of sense. And, we're talking about young people. It's so hard when you're younger to feel like you can do that, because it's almost like an overwhelming expectation. Like, well, this is the job I have. This is how much money it makes. And it's a lot, or it's, more than I was expecting. So I should be happy. Why am I not happy? And so you have to, it's really incredible that you can do that, because you have that life experience. You can be like, hey, no, you don't. So how do you kind of like expand that out to the people you work with?
Oh, for sure. And this is something that I have talked to my therapist about a few times. So I fully endorse having a therapist and changing your career and shaking things up and shooting for the stars. So I think that a lot of it is just providing examples. So I've interviewed, dozens of eco professionals on various pathways, and organic career paths are just more the norm. The expectation that you'll get your first professional job and then quote unquote climb the ladder at that one company in one field is just, it's not that it doesn't occur. It's just that it is a smaller and smaller percentage of folks who end up, looking back at their career and that's what it looked like. So I think it's just about providing the examples and showing young people that the people that they look up to also likely tried something and failed, or tried something and burnt out, or tried something and were fine, but saw something else and wanted to give that a shot. And that there shouldn't be any sort of guilt or disappointment associated with that. And that's really tough sometimes when you're in that moment of saying, I think I want to go in a different direction, because you also have your family, your friends, your coworkers, the fact that you may have spent, an inordinate sum on a degree. And that's why last year at our EcoCareers Conference, Laura talked a lot about transferable skills, because that's something that if you go into your career with the knowledge of transferable skills and what that means and how that can prepare you to go in different directions, and that's not a negation of the work and effort that you had put into your career already, I think that that's something that young people could really benefit from having advanced understanding and knowledge of.
Yeah, absolutely.
That conversation happens with people that I coach all the time. I think I talked to somebody 2 days ago who's working, who's burnout, has a job. It's not a bad job by his own description, but it isn't fulfilling him. And he's like, I kind of know what I want to do. Where do I go? Where do I go now? And then he thinks that all this work he's been doing the last couple of years, and this is not just him, all the other people I coach are like, well, I wasted my time. You haven't wasted any of your time, and so we described how in a new role, he has things he can bring to the table, especially like Nick and I talked about before with small companies, lots of skills that they might be able to use not only in the role that they want to hire him for, but maybe for something else. And so he was able to say, oh, I didn't really think of it that way. And that's really, David, all our job is as a coach is really to help people think about things in a different sort of way. I'm not a failure. I haven't lost all my money. Right. It was an investment, and now I'm moving on to the next thing. So I love it. I love everything and I've watched your EcoLeaders program grow. I think when we first met you, it was just starting and you had just started there. And so it's really become something fantastic. So we'll talk more about that in a few minutes, but we do want to still focus on your career path for a minute, because I also wanted to touch on, you've been in the Peace Corps. And that's another question I hear a lot from people is like, should I try the Peace Corps? Especially when they've graduated and they can't find anything else. They gravitate towards the Peace Corps. Right. And some have good experiences and some don't. So I was wondering, what was your Peace Corps experience like? Where did you go? Did you get to decide? Did they tell you?
Sure. Yeah, I'm happy. I'm always happy to talk about my Peace Corps experience. And it actually ties in with what I was saying when I decided to go in a different direction and was thinking about my experience with water for people. I said, okay, so international development. Let me look at what are the requirements, what are the pathways to get into that space. And Peace Corps is obviously one that is pretty well known and is a launching off point for a lot of people seeking to go in that direction. So I did Peace Corps as part of a master's degree, and it's a program that unfortunately Peace Corps doesn't have anymore. It's called Masters International. And so I went to school at George Mason University for a year, and then did my 2-year service, and then came back and had another semester. So it was sandwiched in a master's degree program, which kind of gives it a different flavor than a lot of quote unquote traditional Peace Corps volunteers that are coming out of a bachelor's degree and go straight into Peace Corps. I went to the Republic of Armenia. It was not a place that, I will just be honest, I would not have been able to pinpoint it on the map. I would know the general area, but I didn't know this, what the border of it looked like.
We may or may not have gotten the map out before we asked you this question.
Yeah. And so I was in the community and youth development program in Armenia, and every different Peace Corps country has a different set of programs that are appropriate for the goals of that country that Peace Corps US and that country's representatives kind of decide. And so in Armenia, we had teaching and we had community and youth development. And so for the first 3 months, you are in a training village and you are going to classes every single day on, or not the weekends, but every weekday on language and on cultural understanding. And so you spend those 3 months with other volunteers, a group of other volunteers. And then at the end of the 3 months, you all go to your different communities that you will be living in for 2 years. I was assigned to the town of Mehri, which is on the southern border of Armenia. So it's on the border with Iran. And I was going there after another volunteer had already served in that particular town. And that's common as well, especially in smaller Peace Corps countries, that you're going somewhere that either a volunteer has been or a volunteer is down the street. And so for the first year, I had another volunteer who was a 10-minute drive away. And then the second year, because they stagger it, he left. And I was kind of alone in my region, which is almost a more traditional Peace Corps experience. And each of those experiences really had their pros and cons.
That's awesome. Did you stay there the whole 2 years?
I did. And I will brag a little bit. I try to be humble, but one of the things that I'll brag about is that they give you the option of leaving a month early and it still counts as your 2 years. And only a handful of us stayed for that last month. But I'm so glad I did, because it was one of the most rewarding months out of my 2 years within the Peace Corps. I was working with a couple other volunteers with an organization that was putting on a leadership development camp for young men. And that was when they scheduled it for. And we were like, well, I guess we're staying for the last month. And it was cool. such a fantastic experience, both working with the youth in that particular camp, as well as with the young adults that had founded and were running this organization for the youth of Armenia.
Wow. Yeah. And so we're an environmental show, and, I don't know much about the Armenian government, how they respond to environmental issues. Is it more of a grassroots thing? Is it, government down? How do they manage it?
It's definitely a grassroots thing. So as a post-Soviet nation, the non-governmental organizations within Armenia are pretty young. They've been around for a couple decades. And so a lot of what they were bringing in bringing in Peace Corps volunteers for was to help them kind of with some Western norms and be able to apply for grants and basically get established as grassroots organizations. And the organizations that we worked with that I worked with were working on a variety of different projects. So while environmental projects were not at the core of my Peace Corps experience, it was something that we were able to blend in that background into different programs that I was working on. So we did some cleanup programs. We did the education programs for youth, usually incorporated some element of healthy living, respect, and environmental awareness.
Yeah. Wow. That's really incredible. And so, throughout the theme of this interview is that, you're giving back to the youth. Where does that inspiration come from? Why do you want to do that?
So to be honest, when I went in and I was assigned to community and youth development, because I was doing this as part of a master's degree in public administration, I thought, my experience is going to be more on the community side, more on the organizations and young adults as opposed to younger youth. And that ended up kind of going in a different direction when I was just really inspired by and able to connect with the youth in the community that I lived in and in the projects that I was working on. And I came out of it more interested in working with youth than when I went into it. And so I kind of credit my Peace Corps experience with my passion for youth development, which I've carried through both in my career as well as in my personal life as well, and my volunteerism here back in the States.
Yeah, which is a great segue to my next question. So we've mentioned EcoLeaders a little bit earlier. We've teased it. What is the program?
It grew out of the National Wildlife Federation's work within colleges and higher education as a whole, and particularly with the undergraduate and graduate student fellows that we were supporting that were doing sustainability projects on their campuses. And we talked to those fellows. We had focus groups talking about, how can we scale this? How can we support more college students across the country somewhat in the way that we were supporting you? And so from that grew the EcoLeaders program. And it is a leadership development program. It's an online community. It's a place to go to get ideas for sustainability projects. A lot of the youth, or much of the youth that we work with, are passionate about the environment but don't know what they necessarily want to do. And then another portion are absolutely certain what they want to do.
Right.
Especially for the folks that aren't quite sure, they go to the EcoLeaders community and they can browse through successful projects of previous EcoLeaders and fellows and get inspiration for the types of projects that they might want to do. The philosophy of EcoLeaders very much is rooted in project-based learning. And we have, in addition to the previous projects, we also have a number of project design and management tools and resources available on the EcoLeaders site.
Yeah. So what kind of projects can people do?
It really runs the gamut. We sort them into eco topics. We have a dozen eco topics, from environmental justice to waste to water to climate change. And the passion of the student really guides the shape of the project that they end up going on. So a lot of them are education oriented. So it's sponsoring a day of education around transportation alternatives or how to recycle correctly and compost your waste. Some of it is focused on school policies. So it has encompassed starting a green fee to fund other sustainability projects on campus. Sometimes it's really technical. We have deer counting. We have something that is tied in with a habitat and wildlife conservation within the region that they live in. So it depends on the passions of the student as well as what they're studying. A lot of the students that are participating and benefiting from EcoLeaders are doing this as part of classes that they're already taking.
Oh, nice. And so how do they get involved then?
They find out about it in various ways. A lot of it is through our network with colleges and universities historically, as well as currently our big campus greening program now is called Campus Race to Zero Waste. And so we work with faculty and staff at hundreds of colleges across the country in the month of February to reduce their waste that goes to landfill from a variety of methods: recycling, reducing purchasing, donations to local organizations. And they track and count all of that to a really specific degree over the month of February. And it's a friendly competition between colleges and universities for who can reduce their waste the most, who can compost the most of their organic waste. And it's a really exciting opportunity. And it's one of the ways that those colleges and universities are able to spread the word about our EcoLeaders and EcoCareers programs directly to their students as well.
Yeah, so it's a really cool program. I'm really glad to hear a lot about it. I know Laura knows some, but it's a learning for me. So I appreciate you walking me through that. There's also an upcoming conference, which is a great opportunity for career seekers. So when is that event and what can people expect from it?
Awesome. So that is called the EcoCareers Conference. It's an annual conference, 2 days. This year it is April 6th and 7th. So it's coming up next week. And each year we feature a number of different sectors of the economy. So this year we put together panels of professionals to talk about their career paths and their advice to young people who may be interested in similar career paths. And this year we're focusing on environmental justice, health and wellness, environmental education, and urban and municipal planning. But whether you're interested in those specific career sectors or not, we also have a number of workshops on career planning. We have sessions dedicated to artists and creative professionals, entrepreneurs, as well as keynote speakers that are delivering more inspirational messages as well. We also have this year, we started last year having separate tracks for the high school students and the college students in the audience to do some more hands-on workshops with them that is more tailored to their interests. So this year we have for the college students, kind of job applications, and for the high school students, college applications. But of course, we don't prescribe it, so anyone can attend any session that they want.
Yeah, which, it makes me think when you're talking with students, you're kind of helping guide them. It's always really hard. For me, when I was, going into college and coming out of college, I'm the kid that didn't know what he wanted to do. And even the guidance you get doesn't always end up being what you do, right? And that's what happened in my case. But I really wish I had something like that when I was younger. So how do you manage expectations? Because I feel like everybody, like what I would have wanted is, oh, you should just go you're going to be a turtle biologist. That's your thing. Go, I'm like, oh, okay, I guess this is what I do. But that's not really how life works. So how do you kind of help, guide, but not shove? You know what I mean?
Yeah. And that's really the balance that we're always, and as career professionals, we're always trying to manage that, not to overprescribe, but also not to be so general that the advice is kind of useless. Right. So a lot of it is writing it out. I'm someone who tries to journal every once in a while and completely fails. But when it comes to career planning, I really believe that the more you write out, the better it is for you to be able to kind of sort through your thoughts. So we follow a pretty traditional career planning process where we start with self-reflection, we move into career exploration, we start putting some of those pieces together. We encourage folks to try things and not put too much pressure on them. So that's another one of the reasons that the EcoLeaders program really encourages students, while they're still students, to work on projects. You may be really passionate about food and sustainable agriculture when you're reading about it on blogs. And then you get into the garden and you get your hands in the dirt and you say, wow, this is really not for me. So the more varied experiences that you can expose yourself to as a young person, as a student, the better equipped you'll be for figuring out what you're not interested in. For a lot of us who don't have that one shining example of what it is that they want to pursue, figuring out what they don't want to do is the best way to identifying and pursuing a rewarding career.
Heck yes.
Yeah. And that's just directly to the point. That was my experience. I went to school for biology because I wanted to work outdoors. I was going to be a park ranger. And then I volunteered to be a park ranger and I was like, hell no, I'm not doing this. I think that's super important. So it's a great program. All of you career seekers from any stage in your life, this is a great event and it's happening next week. So be sure to check that out. But let's switch gears now. We always like to hear about what our guests do for fun, and not that your career development and your job is not fun, especially with the title of NWF. That's very respectable. But what do you do for fun, David?
These days, I am spending a lot of time trying different crafts. I've always enjoyed trying crafts and then not getting to expertise level and moving on to a new one. So that's my MO. But I signed up for a quilting class with a company called Three Little Birds in Hyattsville, Maryland, and I'm enjoying that. So that's my new craft that I'm doing. And then with spring around the corner and having bought a house in September, completely revamping the landscape is on my agenda, and I'm learning patience through this because it's I'm not new to gardening, but I'm certainly new to gardening in an entire lot. And so I want to replace lawn. I want to tear out invasives and non-natives and replace them with native plants. And so I've been trying to educate myself and learn a lot about native plant landscaping. And so that's what I'm spending a lot of my time on outside of EcoLeaders and EcoCareers at the National Wildlife Federation.
Cool. Well, I want to see some pictures at the end of summer of all of your goodies that you're growing.
Well, of 2/3 of the goodies that he's growing, right? That's the plan.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, I hate to say that we're running out of time, but we are. And before we let you go, we always love to ask: is there anything else that you want to mention that we haven't covered?
I think it about covers it, but I just want to encourage everyone to register for the conference, the EcoCareers Conference next week. Registration is free if you want it to be. And what that means is if you create a profile on the NWF EcoLeaders community, which is also free, then you will be able to access a free ticket to the conference. We don't want cost to be a barrier for any young person seeking to plan their career, and that is at NWF EcoLeaders.org.
That's incredible. That's great. Awesome. Thank you so much for being here. Before we let you go, what's the best way for people to get in touch with you?
2 ways. So you are free to email me at corsard@nwf.org. That's CORSARD@nwf.org, or look me up on LinkedIn.
Perfect. Thank you so much for being here, David.
Thanks, David.
Thank you for having me.
That's our show. Thanks, David, for joining us today. Always a pleasure learning more about what NWF and the EcoLeaders are doing. Please be sure to check us out each and every Friday. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review. Bye.
See you, everybody.